and welcome to the Brain AI podcast. I'm your host, Lenka. This is the show for digital agency and innovative brands focused on predictable growth. We deliver the AI solutions and systems required to streamline client acquisition and automate service delivery, ensuring you are maximizing your capacity to scale. Today, we are living into a topic that is absolutely critical for growth, the intersection of marketing and HR. I'm joined by Mike Beeley, CEO of Lightbox Communications. Mike has been shaping the employer brand and talent marketing landscape for more than 2 decades, advising some of the country's biggest organizations on how to attract and retain the people who drive their business forward. Mike is a true expert in what he calls employer marketing, and he has a unique perspective on why the marketing and HR departments need to be sewn together at the hip to truly deliver on a consumer brand promise. Mike, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks, Lenka. Thanks for having me on.
Let's dig in. What was the moment you realized that HR and marketing needed to work together, and what led you to start Lightbox Communications?
Well, there are two questions there. So first, I'll answer the second one first. Lightbox, I started 10 years ago, or 10 years ago next year. We started in February 16. So we're coming up for our 10th year anniversary. It's the third agency I've owned in this space. I started my first one in 92, over 30 years ago. And throughout that time, we've been called many different things, but we've been referred to as many different subject matter phrases. So we started as recruitment advertising. 30 years ago, recruitment advertising was companies that needed to fill vacancies, and newspapers and other traditional media were the go. And of course, that was a massive market, rivers of gold for Fairfax and News Limited. And our role was to help clients understand what they're selling as an employer. You know, we'd ask them, what are we selling here? Why are you a good company to work for? And they shrug their shoulders and they go, well, I don't know. I don't even know why I work here sometimes. So that led us to say, well, you need to have some sort of proposition here. We can't just say, it's a job and we'll pay you. We need to find the uniqueness of you as an employer, so we attract the right people who want to stay here. Otherwise, it's just a drift netting exercise. Otherwise, so we would end up interrogating the clients as to what we can say about the company in the ads. It's a practice that mainstream agencies have been working on and doing and performing for 50, 60 years. With HR, marketing is not a natural talent, hasn't been a natural knowledge base within their role. You know, when they study HR at university, they don't teach them about marketing. It's not about that. It's about other things. So the moment in time when I realized that HR and marketing need to come together was probably 20 years ago when so what was happening was increasingly HR and TA, we call it, talent acquisition, were getting bigger and busier as Australian organizations grew and then as they expanded overseas. There was more and more money going into recruitment advertising. It wasn't necessarily being spent strategically. It was very tactical. It was probably fair to say that recruitment advertising was more like DM, you know, the old days of direct marketing where you run a campaign and if you don't have 1,000 clicks on your website, then it's been a failure. Recruitment advertising has traditionally been seen very much like that. Whereas, of course, over the years, we've encouraged HR to think of it as an always-on, constant learning environment where you're topping up the knowledge inside your organization and improving the quality of your human capital. So it's taken a while. It's taken, you know, and we're still not there yet. And unfortunately, what happens often is marketing, HR either go to marketing for help, and then HR realize what's actually going on and how much money is being spent and the fact that this should be a strategic exercise. And they come along and start influencing HR. And in some cases, end up just sabotaging the whole thing. They either shut it down because it's not being done properly, or they take it over themselves without any extra resource and are unable to perform the right functions. The short answer to your question is it's an ongoing challenge of making sure, particularly in service-driven businesses like banking and retail, anywhere where your product is your people, your output is the quality of staff that you hire, they need to know what they're doing. Marketing need to tell HR what sort of people they want to hire to service and meet the expectations of their customers. We don't always get that right.
Love it. Thank you. I think you a little bit of touch base on this, but what do you say is the single biggest factor at the leadership level that makes or breaks the employer branding effort?
What my personal opinion is that it needs to sit in between HR and marketing. HR are very much a compliance organization or a function. They're there to maintain legal contracts and the law of employment. They are there to avoid catastrophes. They are there to make sure the CEO and the leadership team are supported in growth or shrinking and conduct that. Marketing has never really been part of their remit. It's always been a sort of kind of reactive function. So I think my personal opinion is that TA and employer branding attached to it. Employer branding covers retention as well as attraction, of course, but I think it should sit in between marketing and HR so that it can learn from both sides and can be seen to have its own remit, if you like, and its own ability to deliver solutions, because HR won't always be happy with what employer branding does, and nor will marketing. So they need to have their own 2 feet within an organization. And the unfortunate thing, Lenka, is during economic cycles, when companies are looking to cut back, very often employer branding is seen as the thing that it's a nice to have rather than a core function in the business, because it's buried inside HR. So, and conversely, when organizations are growing, the leadership team should be able to call upon a marketing-driven EB team to say, right, we need to go now. We need to grow by 20%. So we need 20% more staff. How are we going to go about finding the right ones to fuel our growth? But with EB often being buried inside the HR function, they don't get direct access to them, and things get delayed. And so anyway, I'm not sure it will ever happen, and it takes an organization of a certain size for it to happen. You look at some of the big organizations, Microsoft and some of the global businesses, they have big EB teams in the US and increasingly in the UK. They're much more mature markets than we are in this sector. But in Australia, it's very rare to find a team that's empowered and connected to leadership. I don't know the answer to how we make that happen, but it's an ongoing evolution.
Yeah.
Mm.
You also mentioned the talent shortage in Australia. What's the biggest misconception about finding talent that companies still believe?
I think there's still a tendency for organizations to treat people as a commodity. It depends what sector you're in, but all sectors have different challenges. The mining sector, for instance, needs very specific skills and people who are willing to work in the back of beyond in very unpleasant conditions in Western Australia and Northern Queensland, etc. So they have their own challenges. Australian government understands we need to expand beyond our large urban centres. Sydney has a limit in how far it can grow, and we open up the regional centres. So we need people who are willing to work in regional places. That's a reversal of the natural tendency of people to want to come and work in big cities. And in the aged care sector, there are jobs that we don't want to do. So we have to import skills and labour to perform those functions. So if you go into an aged care centre, chances are very high that 90% of the staff in there come from one or more of our Asian neighbours, which again presents challenges. We end up sometimes with national enclaves within these organisations, where one group of people prefer and give best shifts to their friends and to others. So it's a very difficult proposition. It's not just about finding skills. Culture fit is enormously important. And the big one is our aging population. We've had a huge increase in net migration over the last 3 years, almost 1.5 million extra residents in Australia, hopefully all working. That does a couple of things. It fills all the jobs that are very difficult to fill, and it also brings down the average, or it slows down our aging population. Without any interaction or intervention, we will end up like Japan very soon. More of our people will be over 60 than under 20. So who's going to look after all those people as they age? So net migration is quite important to stop this aging process in the country. So it's and we can understand why the present government's doing it. But then, of course, it presents infrastructure challenges. Where do all these people live? Can they live anywhere near where they work? So our business is not just about finding bodies and throwing them into roles. It's about building communities and building balanced, diversified teams. One of the sad things is most technologies used in our industry, in HR and in recruitment, they're pre-programmed to categorize people by age, which is completely illegal. Just as you're not allowed to discriminate on gender, apparently you are allowed to discriminate on age. We have quite rightly had a massive movement over the last 20 years to stop gender discrimination. It's ridiculous. That affects 50% of our workforce. The tendency for software and technologies to start aging people, women at 45 and men at 50, are now classed as mature. 45-year-olds represent 37% of our working population. So we have gender, which fixes 50%, but there's 37% of our population being discriminated against based on their age, which is just ridiculous. And it's holding back organizations. There are some companies doing it really well. Bunnings are just experts at it. They have completely shifted the focus from most organizations. Oh my God, we've got jobs to fill. Oh my God, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? Bunnings have a very different approach on that. They match their demographic of their staff to their customers, which is great. 50-year-old bloke goes into to Bunnings looking for some technical help. They probably want another 50-year-old person or a mature person to give them that advice. They don't want a 20-year-old going, oh, I don't know, I'll have a look at it for you, with the greatest of respect to 20-year-olds. So matching your workforce to your customer expectations is vital, particularly in places like retail. And Bunnings have done that exceptionally well. They allow their staff, when they go, if they want to travel across New Zealand, for instance, they can do a working holiday just with Bunnings. They'll let them apply to different roles at different Bunnings across, because they're all standardized. You can work in Bunnings, Auckland, Wellington, Christchurch, and do a 2 months working holiday in New Zealand and get paid for it. It's fantastic. Opening up roles and opportunities to what people want rather than what we expect them to deliver is a big shift. And that only comes from marketing disciplines. You can't shift an industry to be empathetic towards your talent if you don't listen to them and find out what they want. It sounds straightforward, but it's been a 30-year process for our industry and for me.
Yeah, it is very interesting. And as you said, it's kind of, ongoing work in progress. But basically, we just need more Bunnings, many more.
What we need is more people in HR who think like marketers. That's what we really need. And it is happening. We are seeing it. We are seeing it more and more now. I don't know. I've been asked to contribute. There's a new Cert 3 and diploma in recruiting. You can't go to university and get a qualification in recruitment. It doesn't exist in Australia. So I'm working with a body of people who have been a cert and diploma approved by the ASQA, the government body that fixes education. And they've asked me to write the module on EVP and employer branding within that, and how important marketing is in recruitment. That's the first time that's ever happened in Australia. So that will be a shift. It'll take 6 years to come in as people start learning and educating and go through these two-year qualifications. But that's where it needs to happen at grassroots level. We need more people coming into the HR, into the TA function and EB function who genuinely have marketing understanding. And organizations that can align that do exceptionally well. You look at Southwest Airlines 20 years ago was one of the prime poster children of this, making sure they were hiring people that wanted to do what they said they were going to do for their customers, and then empowering them to do that. They empowered their cabin crew to give out, because stuff goes wrong. We'll get red wine spilt on their Gucci dress and all sorts of things. They empowered their cabin crew to issue a reparation equivalent to the strength or the depth of the consequence of the action. If they had to give them a free flight, they empowered them to do that. That's different. That's really different. Whereas you look at some of the bigger airlines, they all have to work on policy and procedure, and it doesn't matter what the customer thinks. It's them making sure they don't contradict HR. I mean, that's a long-winded discussion, but any organizations where marketing and HR collaborate with each other on making sure that connection is happening, that we're finding and empowering the right people that our customers want to experience. If you can fix that inside an organization, you've got yourself a very powerful force.
Thank you, Mike. That's very insightful. Let's look a little bit more into your agency. Can you walk us through a little bit of a typical client journey in Lightbox?
Yeah, so we work with the pathway we help them navigate is, okay, you need to keep the good people you've got, and you need to go and find more. You need to find better people, you need to do it quicker, and you need to do it in bigger numbers. It's essentially the same as a mainstream ad agency would treat their clients. What are we offering? Who are our customers? What sort of people do we need to fill these roles? Not necessarily just skills, but what's the right culture fit for us? What barriers are there in place already inside the organization that's stopping that happening? And what are the things that we're doing well? So we call that an EVP. It's the internal version of a consumer proposition or a consumer value proposition. And we'll independently talk to their staff, people that have turned them down, people that have left, good people that have left that they didn't want to leave. And we'll find out. We'll get some honest answers around what they're doing well and what they're doing badly. We'll then take that back to leadership to say, okay, this is what you need to fix and this is what you need to keep doing. They will then decide whether they want to do that and invest in that. And if they do, fantastic. We then move to what that looks like creatively to different people, because a job's not a job. We develop personas very, very often for our clients, for people at different levels of their life who could perform that role. If you take allied health, for instance, occupational therapists, there are 4 types of OTs. There are the young ones who have just qualified, who've just come out of university, possibly single and mobile and wanting to go for a bit of an adventure. If you can take them around and show them around and mentor them, that's what they're looking for from that company. Then OTs are primarily female, 93% female. So very often they'll enter a phase in life where they're starting a family. They can still work, but they don't want to travel. So I now need a job near my home that fits in with my lifestyle. And then later on, as kids have gone and they enter their 50s, you might get another 10, 15 years out of them, and they go back to what they wanted when they were younger. They want, okay, I want to travel a bit more now. Perhaps I want to work part-time, or I want to work here, or I'd like to go and work in the town I was born in. Different things at different stages of life are important to people. And if you can mirror that and offer that. And then the 4th group are the 7% of OTs that are male, which are about 4,000 of them in Australia. No one puts them on their ads. No one aims the OT messages at men because most of them are female. We always assume that an OT or a speech pathologist is female. So that's another untapped market. So those are disciplines that have never existed really in recruitment and in HR. It's always a very transactional, as I say, I liken it to DM. Factory managers phoned up, the factory's bulging with washing machines. We need to sell a few. Go out and sell a few washing machines. And then 2 months later, you get another call. We run out of washing machines. Turn the ads off. That's how recruitment has been over the years, very reactive. And because of our size in Australia, auctions don't have that depth of skill here. We don't have a size and breadth and maturity of teams that they may have overseas, in, as I say, in Europe or perhaps even parts of APAC. So we end up working as an extension to their teams to help them adopt these principles. And once they do it, it's great, and everyone gets involved. Leadership love it. They see it as a sort of dashboard and a way of changing the culture of the organization. HR love it. HR absolutely love it once they see the disciplines. And marketing, once they trust us that we're not going to diminish or mess with their brand, they get involved as well. So we end up having stakeholder groups that include marketing, HR, leadership, and various other people. Even though it's an HR issue, you've got to make sure everyone else in the organization is comfortable with what you're doing with their brand.
This is so interesting, Mike. Such a niche sector and place to be in.
Well, here in the US and the UK, it's massive. In the UK, in Australia, there's probably 2 or 3 agencies like us. There are others that do components of what we do, but we're the only agency that does everything from start to finish, from uncovering the EVP through to taking it to recruitment marketing, to target audiences that aren't necessarily looking for work. So not job ads, but ads to people around jobs that people may not have realized they wanted. So there's only a couple of us doing it here. In the UK, there's 40. And in the States, there's probably a similar amount. It's a much more mature market in the UK and other parts of Europe as well. Germany and France are quite sophisticated in this. Yeah, I always measure the state of an industry by the award systems that it has. In the UK, there are 2. There's the Recruitment Marketing Awards and then the RAD Awards, which are on at the end of January this year. and they pour everyone wants to win that because it's like the Oscars, we know the quality of the judging's right. They have over 26 judges that spend 2 days locked in a room just judging all these awards. We don't have that here. I tried starting them years ago. Fairfax did a great award system back in the 2008, but then after the GFC that went away, and then they got bought by Channel 9, and then newspaper advertising disappeared, so they sort of gave up. It's only when you are put in the same room as other people that you have your quality of work judged that you realize whether you're doing well or bad. In our industry, people rarely look at other people's recruitment marketing. They only look at their own, so you don't know where you are in the pecking order. So yeah, but you're right.
100%. Let's just maybe tap into a little bit into AI. Looking ahead, how will AI and changing demographics impact employer branding, let's say in the next 5 years? What do you think?
Well, okay. So the first thing I'd say is I'm a little worried that AI is being used it's a blanket that's being pulled over too many things. To me, AI is going the same way as crypto. It's this fabulous vague thing that's going to fix all our problems. It's a piece of technology. What it does, it accelerates things. It makes smart people smarter and more effective, and it makes stupid people probably lose their jobs, I would imagine. The jobs that AI is looking to replace are not the highly skilled role, where people are constantly learning. It's the repetitive, mundane roles. Those are the ones that are in jeopardy. So we call it machine learning. I like to call it machine learning, which is a much more descriptive term. How that will affect employer branding? Well, there's an article in the UK recently, probably from an AI sales company, but it said our websites are dead now. AI, you can just read everything on AI. Well, that's not strictly true. Your website is going to be the most important part of your organization under AI moving forwards. Machine learning will bring more and more relevant people to your website, and they will arrive there and either make have a glum perception of you as an organization, or they'll love you. Just AI or machine learning will accelerate the volume and perhaps the quality of people coming into your organization, but it can't shift their opinion of you when they get there. That AI is not really going to help too much in that. That's a human endeavor. Jimmy Carr summed up AI very well. The comedian. He said AI it's a right brain product. It sorts out the washing and the stuff and makes repetitive things a lot easier, and in some cases removes them. But it won't come up with a joke. It won't invent a story. It won't write a book for you that hasn't been written before. It'll give you an interpretation. And I think there's a great danger that people will come to rely on it too much. I think there's a pendulum where AI or machine learning is extremely useful. And then I think it will shift, and already has shifted. People will start asking it to do things that could actually damage them in some way. I don't know. Whenever I see myself saying that, I sound like an old fart, but I think we've got to be very careful. Like we have been forever. Matt Coleman, the CEO of one of our big banks, he was saying the other day, someone asked him, is AI costing jobs at your bank? And he said, look, without a shadow of a doubt, it's replacing the need for certain humans, yes. But by the same token, we now need more people in cybersecurity, and we need more people to keep an eye on AI to make sure it doesn't run riot with our customers' money and security. So machine learning will help us improve the quality of human endeavor, I suppose. Each of us will become more productive, well, hopefully more productive and accomplished. But I don't. The people that it replaces will find out they're not going to be out in the street. They will retrain. They'll find other things to do. They'll find other, perhaps more relevant places for them to be in life. So Australia's, we're the size of America, but with a population around 60% of California. A migration program will not allow us to bring in 3 million people over the next 5 years. We just can't do it. We've been trying to do it for the last 3 years, and we've reached a crunch point where infrastructure can't keep up with the level of net migration we've had, and we're seeing that all over the place now. So we won't change anytime soon. They say by 2050 our population is going to be 40 million. Well, that's still smaller than California.
It is.
California alone is bigger than that. Yeah. So we will never have big teams to be able to do this. We will always have to do things on the sort of smell of an oily rag. Australia, we did a global survey just recently where in employee branding. We did one across 350 global organizations and benchmarked Australia against them. And we are actually quite cautious with adoption. Our adoption of AI has been relatively less than the US, for instance. The US is very data driven. They're hungry for these things. It's a much more competitive environment, where the nature of Australia is to be a bit more thoughtful and not cynical, but thoughtful and critical about things like this. And it's funny, you see, particularly on LinkedIn, look at some of the profiles that on LinkedIn that the owner has allowed LinkedIn's AI tool to write. And it just makes them ridiculous. It talks about them in the third person, and it decides what you've done in life. It likes to write a version of what you think you are rather than what you actually are, which of course is a recipe for disaster. People are going to meet you one day and realize that profile is a bunch of fabrications. I think our clients are good. They're not rushing. They're cautious with machine learning and AI because, it will work and it will help us, but at some point it will stop helping us and may even go the other way and hinder us or create issues that we don't need. So I think, as with any technology, a thoughtful, careful approach.
Thank you, Mike. That was really incredible. What's the best way for our audience to connect with you or learn more about Lightbox Communications?
Buy me a beer down the pub. You can get hold of me. My email address is on our website. We're called Lightbox Communications. Go on there. My phone number and my email address is on there. We're a small business. So I say this is my third agency. My first agency back in the olden days, I sold that one to a large global ad agency who are now called Havas. 45 people, and it was a different era then. Our industry was completely different. Now we're a much smaller group of half a dozen people, but with an extended team and network of freelancers that we call upon. And that's one of the challenges of running any company, but particularly agencies, is that we have to scale up and down the various economic cycles, and our business is particularly susceptible to economic fluctuations, and we're often the first thing to get cut. So having a scalable team is absolutely vital in this business.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much, Mike. You can find all those links and resources in the description below if you'd like to collaborate with Lightbox Communications. To all of our listeners, thank you for tuning in. Remember to subscribe and review. We'll be back soon with another interesting topic.
Thank you.